You know that feeling when someone looks at you like you don't belong? Like you're somehow less than human because of where you come from or what you look like. Yeah, well, let me tell you about the day I met Linda Morrison, the HOA president who thought she ran the entire universe from her little suburban kingdom. This woman had no idea who she was messing with, and what happened next. Let's just say karma has a very detailed memory. It was a scorching Saturday afternoon in July, the kind of day where the Arizona heat turns asphalt into something that feels like walking on the surface of the sun. I just moved into Sunshine Meadows, this gated community on the outskirts of Phoenix. Beautiful place, honestly. Palm trees lining every street, perfectly manicured lawns that looked like someone trimmed them with nail scissors, and a community pool that sparkled like a sapphire under that merciless desert sun. I'd been working undercover for the FBI for 6 years at that point, and this assignment was supposed to be my break. A soft posting, they called it. Keep an eye on some financial irregularities in the area, blend into suburban life, and for once, try to have something resembling a normal existence. My real name's Marcus, by the way, but in this neighborhood, I was just Mark Coleman, a freelance IT consultant who worked from home. Boring. Forgettable. Exactly what I needed to be. That Saturday, I grabbed my towel, my sunscreen, and the pool keys that came with my house purchase, and I headed down to the community pool. I was maybe 20 feet from the gate when I heard her voice for the first time. Sharp. Piercing. Like nails on a chalkboard wrapped in fake politeness. Excuse me. Excuse me. You there? I turned around, and there she stood. Linda Morrison. 50-something, with that specific haircut that screams "I want to speak to your manager," dyed blonde hair with dark roots showing, oversized sunglasses perched on her head, and a clipboard. Always the clipboard. She wore a white visor, a pink polo shirt with the HOA logo embroidered on it, and she walked toward me with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in her entire life. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral and friendly. She looked me up and down like I was something unpleasant she'd stepped in. "I don't recognize you. Are you a resident here, or are you someone's guest?" Now, I'd dealt with terrorists, drug cartels, and organized crime syndicates. I'd been shot at, stabbed, and once nearly blown up in a warehouse in Detroit. But something about the way this woman looked at me, with that mixture of suspicion and disgust, made my blood pressure spike in a way that surprised me. "I'm a resident," I said calmly. "Just moved into 447, Saguaro Drive last week." Her eyes narrowed behind her designer sunglasses. "Is that so? Well, I'm Linda Morrison, president of the Sunshine Meadows HOA, and I take pool security very seriously. We've had issues with unauthorized people using our facilities." "I understand," I replied, pulling out my key. "I have my pool key right here. It came with my purchase package." She stepped closer, invading my personal space in that aggressive way that certain people do when they want to intimidate you. "A key doesn't mean anything. I need to verify your residency status. Do you have your HOA welcome packet? Your signed community guidelines agreement? Your proof of property ownership?" I felt my jaw tighten. "Ma'am, respectfully, I just moved in. I'm still unpacking. I have my key, which was issued by the HOA, and I'm a homeowner here. I think that's sufficient." Her face flushed red, and I could see the anger building behind her eyes. "Don't you man me with that attitude. I don't know who you think you are, but in this community, we follow rules. We have standards here. This isn't some inner-city apartment complex where anyone can just waltz in." And there it was. The racism wasn't even subtle. It hung in the air between us like toxic smoke. I'm a black man, 6'2", athletic build from years of FBI training, and in that moment, I realized that to Linda Morrison, that was all that mattered. Not that I was a federal agent. Not that I'd served my country for years. Not that I'd probably done more in 1 week than she'd done in her entire privileged life. To her, I was just someone who didn't fit her picture of what this neighborhood should look like. "Ma'am," I said again, deliberately calm, "I'm going to use the pool now. If you have concerns about my residency, you're welcome to check the HOA records. Mark Coleman. 447, Saguaro Drive. Have a nice day. I turned and started walking toward the pool gate. Behind me, I heard her sharp intake of breath, the sound of someone completely unused to being dismissed. "Don't you walk away from me," she shouted. "Don't you dare walk away from me. I'm calling my husband. He's a police officer, and he'll deal with people like you." I stopped at the gate, key in hand, and looked back at her. She was practically vibrating with rage, her phone already out, her fingers jabbing at the screen with furious intensity. "You do what you need to do," I said quietly. Then I unlocked the gate and walked into the pool area. The water was perfect. Cool, clear, and for about 15 minutes, absolutely peaceful. I swam laps, trying to let go of the encounter, reminding myself that this was exactly the kind of thing I'd dealt with my entire life. But something about it felt different this time. Maybe because I thought that owning a home in a nice neighborhood, having worked my way up through the ranks, having literally put my life on the line for this country, maybe I thought that would somehow shield me from this kind of ignorance. I should have known better. Because exactly 16 minutes after I entered that pool, Linda Morrison returned. And this time, she brought her husband. Part 2, Officer Morrison arrives, 1,000 words. The gate clanged open with a metallic bang that echoed across the pool area. I was floating on my back, eyes closed, letting the water support me, when I heard the heavy footsteps. Military-style boots on concrete. I didn't need to open my eyes to know what was coming. "That's him," Linda's voice rang out, sharp and triumphant. "That's the one I told you about." I righted myself in the water and opened my eyes. Standing at the edge of the pool was Officer Derek Morrison, and he looked exactly like what I expected. Tall, broad-shouldered, probably late 40s, with that specific swagger that some cops develop when they've been on the force long enough to forget they're public servants, not soldiers in occupied territory. He was in full uniform, complete with utility belt, radio, and his hand resting casually on his service weapon. Behind him, Linda stood with her arms crossed, that clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield, a satisfied smirk on her face that made me want to throw something. Several other residents had gathered near the pool entrance, drawn by the commotion. I could see their faces. Some looked concerned. Others looked curious. A few looked uncomfortable, like they knew exactly what this was but didn't want to get involved. "You," Officer Morrison said, pointing at me with the kind of authority that probably worked on most people. "Out of the pool. Now." I took my time. Swam to the edge. Pulled myself out. Grabbed my towel. Dried my face. Every movement deliberate, calm, controlled. Years of training kicked in automatically. Never show fear. Never show anger. Stay professional. Stay aware. "Is there a problem, officer?" I asked, my voice level. "You're trespassing," he said flatly. "My wife is the HOA president, and she's informed me that you don't have authorization to use these facilities." I reached for my pool key, which I'd left on the nearby table with my phone and water bottle. "Sir, I'm a resident here. I have a pool key that was issued to me when I purchased my home." 447, Saguaro Drive. Mark Coleman. He didn't even look at the key. Keys can be stolen. Keys can be copied. You're refusing to provide proper documentation of residency, and you're being belligerent with HOA officials. I wasn't belligerent, I said calmly. I was polite. I explained my situation. And I have every right to be here. Linda jumped in, her voice rising to that pitch that makes dogs start howling 3 neighborhoods over. He was completely disrespectful. He walked away from me while I was talking to him. He refused to follow community protocols. And frankly, Derek, we don't know who this person is. We don't know what kind of element he might represent. Element. That word hung in the air like a slap. The other residents shifted uncomfortably. One older woman, Mrs. Chin from down the street, caught my eye and gave me a small, sympathetic look, but she didn't say anything. Nobody did. Officer Morrison stepped closer to me, close enough that I could smell his cologne and see the small scar on his left cheek. I'm going to need to see some ID. And I'm going to need you to hand over that pool key until your residency status can be verified. This was the moment. This was where most people would cave, would comply, would let themselves be humiliated just to avoid escalation. And part of me, the part that had been trained to blend in and not draw attention, wanted to do exactly that. But another part of me, the part that had spent 6 years watching criminals hide behind badges and authority figures abuse their power, felt something different. Officer Morrison, I said carefully, I've been respectful. I've explained my situation. I'm a homeowner here, and I have just as much right to these facilities as anyone else. I'm not causing a disturbance. I'm not breaking any laws. And with all due respect, sir, you're off duty, in a private community, and your wife's personal grievance doesn't constitute a legitimate reason for law enforcement intervention. His face went red. I'd hit a nerve. Behind him, I saw Linda's eyes go wide with shock that anyone would dare speak to her husband that way. Are you refusing to comply with a police officer's instructions? Derek's hand moved closer to his weapon, just a subtle shift, but enough to be noticed. Enough to be a threat. Several things happened in my mind simultaneously. First, I calculated the physical dynamics. If he went for his weapon, I could disarm him in approximately 2 seconds. Not because I wanted to, but because I had been trained by some of the best tactical instructors in the federal system. Second, I considered the optics. A black man in a confrontation with a white police officer in a suburban neighborhood. No matter what the truth was, I knew how that story would get told. Third, I thought about my mission. I was supposed to be undercover. Low profile. Invisible. But fourth, and most importantly, I thought about every other person who'd been in this exact situation and didn't have the training, the knowledge, or the protection that I had. Every person who'd been humiliated, threatened, or worse, just for existing in a space where someone else thought they didn't belong. I'm not refusing anything, I said quietly. I'm exercising my rights as a citizen and a property owner. If you want to verify my residency, you can contact the HOA management company. Their office opens Monday morning. But I'm not surrendering my property key, and I'm not leaving this pool area until I'm ready to leave. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Derek Morrison stared at me with undisguised hostility. Linda looked like she might actually explode. The gathered residents watched with wide eyes, probably expecting this to turn into the kind of viral video that dominates news cycles for weeks. You're making a big mistake, Derek said, his voice low and threatening. I met his eyes directly. No, sir. I don't think I am. Part 3, the power play escalates, 1,000 words. What happened next was like watching a master class in abuse of authority, and honestly, if I hadn't been on the receiving end of it, I might have been impressed by the sheer audacity. Officer Derek Morrison pulled out his radio, maintaining eye contact with me the entire time, and called for backup. This is Morrison. I've got a situation at the Sunshine Meadows community pool. Possible trespassing, individual refusing to comply with lawful orders. Requesting additional unit for support. I felt my jaw clench. He was escalating. He was deliberately turning a neighborhood dispute into a potential arrest situation, and we both knew exactly why. The other residents started murmuring. Some pulled out their phones, probably filming now, which was actually the smartest thing anyone had done so far. Evidence. Documentation. The things that tell the truth when people lie. Linda stepped forward, emboldened by her husband's display. You see? This is what happens when we let just anyone buy property here. The standards have completely fallen. The board is going to hear about this. I'm filing an official complaint, and I'm going to make sure your key access is permanently revoked. On what grounds? I asked, still maintaining that careful calm that was taking more effort than I wanted to admit. On the grounds that you're a disruptive presence. That you've shown disrespect for community leadership. that you've created a hostile environment and forced us to involve law enforcement. We have standards here, Mr. Coleman, if that's even your real name. There it was. If that's even your real name. The implications were clear. I was suspicious. I was other. I was someone who didn't belong, and they were going to use every tool at their disposal to push me out. My real name is Mark Coleman, I said evenly. And I've broken no rules, violated no policies, and committed no crimes. What I have done is refuse to be intimidated by someone who thinks a title gives them the right to treat people however they want. Derek moved closer again, his body language aggressive, occupying space in that way cops do when they want to provoke a reaction. You're about 5 seconds away from being arrested for disorderly conduct and resisting a lawful order. What lawful order? I asked. You're off duty. This is private property. There's no crime being committed. You're here because your wife is upset that someone didn't immediately bow to her authority. That's not law enforcement. That's harassment. I watched his hand twitch toward his cuffs. He wanted to do it. He wanted to arrest me, to put me in my place, to prove that he could. And I knew, in that moment, that this wasn't just about the pool. This was about power. This was about a man who'd probably spent his entire career using his badge as a weapon, married to a woman who'd spent her entire life using her privilege the same way, and they'd finally run into someone who wasn't going to just roll over. The radio crackled. Unit responding to your location, Morrison. ETA 3 minutes. 3 minutes. I had 3 minutes to decide how this was going to play out. I could identify myself right now. Pull out my FBI credentials. Watch the color drain from both their faces. End this immediately. But that would blow my cover, potentially compromise an active investigation, and honestly, part of me wanted to see just how far they were willing to take this. More residents had gathered now. Maybe 15 people, watching from a safe distance. Mrs. Chin was on her phone, probably calling her husband. A younger couple, the Johnsons I think their names were, looked genuinely disturbed by what they were seeing. An older man, Mr. Patterson, who'd been friendly when I'd moved in, stepped forward. Derek, Linda, come on now, he said, his voice placating. Maybe we're all getting a bit heated here. It's hot, everyone's tired. Maybe we can all just take a step back and sort this out like neighbors. Linda whirled on him. Stay out of this, Richard. This doesn't concern you. This is an HOA matter and a police matter. It concerns all of us, he replied, more firmly now. This is our community. Mark here is our neighbor. I helped him carry boxes when he moved in last week. He's a good guy. This is getting out of hand. I felt a surge of gratitude toward Mr. Patterson, but I also saw the look Derek gave him. A warning look. A remember who you're talking to look. And Mr. Patterson, to his credit, didn't back down, but he didn't push further either. He'd said his piece, and that took courage, more courage than most people show. When the backup unit gets here, Derek said, turning back to me, you're going to be placed in handcuffs, removed from this property, and cited at minimum. If you resist, it'll be arrest. So I'm giving you one last chance. Hand over the pool key, provide identification, and leave peacefully. I looked at him for a long moment. Then at Linda, who was practically glowing with vindictive satisfaction. Then at the gathered residents, some sympathetic, some uncomfortable, some just looking for entertainment. This was America in a nutshell. This exact moment. Power confronting dignity. Authority confronting justice. And a whole crowd of people watching to see which one would win. No, I said simply. Derek's eyes widened slightly. He genuinely hadn't expected that. Nobody ever said no to him. His whole career, his whole life, had probably been people complying, people backing down, people recognizing his authority and submitting to it. What did you say? I said no. I'm not handing over my property. I'm not leaving. I'm a resident here, I'm breaking no laws, and I'm not going anywhere. The sirens in the distance started to grow louder. The backup unit was arriving. This was about to get very interesting. Part 4, backup arrives and things get complicated, 1,000 words. The patrol car rolled up to the pool area with its lights flashing but no siren, which was at least something. 2 officers stepped out, both younger than Derek Morrison, both looking like they weren't entirely sure why they'd been called to a community pool on a Saturday afternoon. The first officer, his name tag Red Chin, no relation to Mrs. Chin as far as I knew, approached with a neutral expression. Professional. The second, Officer Martinez, hung back slightly, her hand near her radio, assessing the situation with sharp eyes that told me she was the smarter of the two. Derek, Officer Chin said with a nod. What's the situation? Derek gestured toward me like I was Exhibit A in a criminal trial. Got a trespasser here. Refuses to provide ID, refuses to leave private property, getting belligerent with residents and refusing lawful orders. I watched Officer Martinez's eyes flick between Derek, Linda, me, and the gathered crowd. She was reading the room, and I could see the exact moment she realized this wasn't what Derek had made it sound like on the radio. Sir, Officer Chin addressed me, his tone professional but tired. Can you tell me your side of this? I'm a resident here, I explained calmly. Mark Coleman, 447, Saguaro Drive. I moved in last week. I came to use the community pool with my pool key that was issued to me. Mrs. Morrison approached me and demanded additional documentation. When I declined to produce it immediately, stating I was still unpacking, she became aggressive. Officer Morrison, who is her husband and was off duty, arrived and has been threatening to arrest me for exercising my rights as a homeowner. Officer Martinez stepped forward now, and I could see the concern in her eyes. Do you have identification with you, sir? It's in my bag, inside the pool area. I gestured to the table where I'd left my belongings. Can you retrieve it, please? This was interesting. She wasn't ordering. She was asking. That subtle difference meant everything. I nodded and walked over to my bag, very aware that I now had 3 armed police officers watching my every movement. I pulled out my wallet and returned, handing over my driver's license. Officer Martinez studied it carefully. Mark Coleman, 447, Saguaro Drive. She looked up at me, then at Derek. This address is inside this community? Yes, I confirmed. I can provide closing documents, deed, HOA welcome packet, anything you need. It's all at my house. That won't be necessary, she said, handing my license back. Then she turned to Derek, and I saw something flash in her eyes. Frustration maybe. Or recognition of what this really was. Derek, he's a resident. He has valid ID. There's no trespassing here. Derek's face went even redder. He refused to comply with HOA protocols. He was disrespectful to Linda, who's the president and has authority over these facilities. Officer Martinez's expression didn't change, but her voice got slightly firmer. HOA disputes are civil matters. This isn't a criminal issue. Unless there's an actual law being broken, we shouldn't be involved. Linda jumped in, her voice rising to that pitch again. He's creating a disturbance. He's making residents feel unsafe. That's a crime, isn't it? Officer Martinez turned to look at the gathered residents. Does anyone here feel unsafe because of this gentleman? Silence. Glorious, telling silence. Mr. Patterson shook his head. The Johnsons looked away. Mrs. Chin actually spoke up, her accented voice clear and strong. He did nothing wrong. He was swimming. Linda was the one yelling. I watched Linda's face transform from shock to rage to something uglier. She looked at Mrs. Chin like she'd just committed treason. You don't know what you're talking about, Margaret. You weren't here from the beginning. I was here, another voice spoke up. A teenager, maybe 17, holding up his phone. I recorded the whole thing. Started recording when I heard the yelling. Want me to send you the video, officers? Oh, this was beautiful. This was absolutely beautiful. Derek and Linda both looked at that kid like he'd just pulled a weapon. The power dynamic had shifted so fast I almost felt dizzy. "That won't be necessary," Officer Chen said, but Martinez gave him a look that clearly said it absolutely might be necessary. "Actually," Martinez said, "if you witnessed the initial confrontation, that video might be helpful. Can you send it to me?" She pulled out a card with her email. The kid nodded, fingers already moving on his phone. "Sending it now. Shows everything." Mr. Coleman was polite the whole time. Mrs. Morrison was not. Derek stepped toward the kid, and I saw Martinez move subtly to intercept. "That's enough. Everyone just calm down." But Derek wasn't done. He turned to me, and I could see desperation now mixing with the anger. He was losing control of the situation, and he knew it. "This isn't over. I'm filing a report. You might be a resident, but you're still a problem, and we have ways of dealing with problems in this community." There it was. A direct threat. In front of witnesses. In front of 2 other officers. I almost wanted to thank him for being that stupid. "Derek," Officer Martinez said sharply, "that's inappropriate." "Sir," she turned to me, "I apologize for this situation. You have every right to be here and to use the community facilities. If you have any further problems, you can file a complaint with the HOA management company, or if you feel you're being harassed, you can file a police report." She emphasized those last 2 words while looking directly at Derek. The message was clear: back off, or this goes official. "I appreciate that, Officer Martinez," I said. "I just want to live peacefully in my home and use the facilities I'm paying for." Officer Chen looked uncomfortable, like he knew they'd been called out on a bogus complaint but didn't want to directly contradict a fellow officer. "All right, well, if everything's sorted here, we'll be heading out." Derek grabbed Chen's arm. "Wait, you're not going to do anything?" He was disrespectful. He refused lawful orders. Martinez stepped in front of Derek. There were no lawful orders. This was a civil dispute. "We're done here." The tension was thick enough to swim through, but Martinez and Chen walked back to their patrol car, and after a moment, they drove away. The crowd began to disperse, though several people gave me sympathetic nods or looks of support as they left. Which left me standing there with Derek and Linda Morrison, both of whom looked like they wanted to see me disappear from the face of the earth. "This isn't over," Linda hissed. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." I smiled, a small, calm smile that probably looked more confident than I felt. "Actually, ma'am, I think it's you who has no idea who you're dealing with. Have a nice day." Part 5, the HOA harassment campaign begins, 1,000 words. If you think Derek and Linda Morrison took their humiliation gracefully and moved on with their lives, you don't know people like them. People like that don't just accept defeat. They don't learn lessons. They escalate. The first notice came 3 days after the pool incident. A formal letter from the HOA, delivered to my mailbox in an official envelope with the Sunshine Meadows logo embossed on the corner. I opened it while standing in my driveway, the Arizona sun beating down on my shoulders, and I had to read it twice because I genuinely couldn't believe what I was seeing. Notice of violation, improper lawn maintenance. Your grass exceeds the maximum allowed height of 2.5 inches as stipulated in Community Guidelines Section 7, Paragraph 3. You have 5 days to remedy this violation or face a fine of $100 per day until compliance is achieved. I looked at my lawn. I'd literally mowed it 2 days ago. It was perfect. Every blade of grass was uniform, crisp, and well within any reasonable standard. I walked to my neighbor's yard, Mr. Patterson's place. His grass was noticeably longer than mine. Then I checked the Johnson's lawn across the street. Same thing. But it was my lawn that violated the rules, apparently. Strike 1. The next day, another notice. Notice of violation, unapproved exterior modification. A decorative item has been placed on your front porch without prior HOA approval. Community guidelines require all exterior decorations to be submitted for review and approval before installation. The decorative item in question? A small welcome mat. A plain, brown welcome mat that said welcome in simple letters. I walked the entire street. Every single house had a welcome mat. Most of them far more decorative than mine. Mrs. Chen had one with flowers and a garden gnome. The Hendersons had one that played music when you stepped on it. But mine violated the rules. Strike two. I wasn't stupid. I knew exactly what this was. This was Linda Morrison weaponizing the HOA to make my life miserable, and she was probably getting off on every single violation notice she generated. But here's the thing about being an FBI agent, patience is literally part of the job description. I could wait. I could document. And I could build a case. So that's what I did. I took photos of every violation notice. Photos of my property. Photos of my neighbor's property showing identical or worse violations. I documented dates, times, and the selective enforcement. I created a spreadsheet because that's what investigators do, we make spreadsheets. And I waited for Linda to make a mistake. I didn't have to wait long. 1 week after the pool incident, I came home from a grocery run to find a tow truck in my driveway, attempting to hook up my car. A metallic gray sedan, nothing fancy, properly registered and parked in my own driveway. Whoa, whoa, whoa! I jogged over, grocery bags still in hand. What's going on here? The tow truck driver, a heavy-set guy in his 50s with a grizzled beard, looked uncomfortable. Sorry, man. Got a call from the HOA. Says this vehicle is abandoned and blocking community access. Abandoned? I drove it 30 minutes ago. And it's in my driveway. On my property. He shrugged apologetically. Look, I just do what I'm told. The HOA has an agreement with our company. They call, we tow. I pulled out my phone and showed him my registration, my driver's license, and a photo of my house deed that I'd started keeping handy. This is my car, at my house, on my property. If you tow it, that's theft. The guy studied my documents, then looked at the work order on his clipboard, then back at me. Man, I don't know what to tell you. This is the address they gave me. Who called it in? He checked his paperwork. Linda Morrison. She's listed as the HOA president. Of course she was. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Sir, I'm documenting this. That's my car, on my property. I'm informing you directly that you do not have permission to tow it, and if you proceed, I'll be filing theft charges and calling the police. The tow truck driver held up his hands. All right. Not worth the hassle. But you need to sort this out with your HOA, man. This is the third call I've gotten from this community this month for bogus tows. Something weird is going on here. Third call. Interesting. That meant I wasn't the only target. Linda was using the tow company as a weapon against multiple residents. That was a pattern. Patterns were evidence. After the driver left, I did something I probably should have done earlier. I started knocking on doors. Not a lot, just a few neighbors I'd spoken to casually. Mr. Patterson invited me in for iced tea and told me about the $500 in fines he'd racked up for unauthorized window treatments because his curtains were beige instead of the approved white or cream. Mrs. Chen showed me a stack of violation notices about her garden gnomes, her mailbox decoration, even the color of her recycling bins. The Johnsons, the young couple, were the most revealing. They'd been fined repeatedly for their children's toys being visible in the backyard, for parking their stroller on their front porch, for noise violations when their baby cried at night. They looked exhausted, stressed, and genuinely scared. We're thinking about selling, Mrs. Johnson said quietly, bouncing their infant son on her hip. We can't afford these fines, and Linda makes everything so hostile. Every HOA meeting is just her attacking people, and her husband sits there in his police uniform, and everyone's too intimidated to fight back. There it was. The full picture. Linda Morrison wasn't just targeting me. She was running a harassment campaign against anyone she deemed unsuitable or anyone who dared challenge her authority. And Derek's presence, his badge, his gun, they were all tools of intimidation to keep people compliant. This wasn't just about a pool key anymore. This was systemic abuse of power, and it was affecting multiple families. And honestly, that made it personal in a way that my own harassment didn't. I could handle Linda and Derek coming after me. But watching them terrorize a young couple with a baby? Watching Mrs. Chen, who'd lived here for 15 years, being nickel-and-dimed into poverty with bogus fines? That was different. That required action. I went home, opened my laptop, and did something I'd been avoiding. I sent a secure message to my field supervisor. Need to discuss potential corruption investigation. Local PD officer abusing authority. May need to adjust current assignment parameters. Request meeting ASAP. The response came back within an hour. Meeting approved. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., secure location. Come prepared with preliminary evidence. It was time to stop playing defense and start playing offense. Linda and Derek Morrison had no idea what they'd just triggered. They thought they were dealing with some regular guy they could bully and intimidate. They were about to find out exactly how wrong they were. Part 6, the FBI investigation begins, 1,000 words. The secure location turned out to be a coffee shop in downtown Phoenix, the kind of aggressively hipster place with exposed brick walls, reclaimed wood furniture, and baristas who took longer to make your coffee than it took to brew it in 1820. My field supervisor, Assistant Special Agent in Charge Patricia Reeves, was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with clear sight lines to both entrances. Old habits. Marcus, she greeted me, using my real name because we were far enough from Sunshine Meadows that it didn't matter. She was in her late 40s, sharp as a razor, with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun and eyes that could read a lie from 3 blocks away. Patricia, I nodded, sitting down with my overpriced artisan coffee. Thanks for meeting. Your message was intriguing. Local PD corruption? That's not our usual jurisdiction. This better be good. I pulled out my tablet and opened the files I'd compiled. Photos, violation notices, witness statements I'd documented, the attempted tow truck incident, everything. I walked her through the entire situation, from the pool confrontation to the systematic harassment of multiple residents. Patricia studied the information carefully, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied me for a long moment. So the HOA president and her cop husband are on a power trip. Unfortunate, but that's usually a local matter. What makes this federal? This was the part I'd been building toward. I pulled up another file, this one showing financial records I'd been quietly accessing as part of my original assignment. Remember why I'm in this neighborhood in the first place? Financial irregularities? The potential money laundering operation traced to several shell companies in the Phoenix metro area. Right. Well, guess whose name shows up on 3 of those shell company registrations? I showed her the documents. Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly, which for her was the equivalent of someone else jumping out of their chair and shouting. Derek Morrison. He's on the board of directors for 2 real estate investment companies and listed as a silent partner in a property management firm. All 3 companies have been flagged for suspicious financial activity. That's interesting, Patricia said carefully. But it doesn't directly connect to the harassment you're experiencing. Doesn't it? Think about it. Linda Morrison has been HOA president for 6 years. During that time, she's systematically pushed out over 40 families through escalating fines, violation notices, and harassment. Those properties get sold under duress, usually below market value. And guess which property management company keeps ending up with the listings? I pulled up the sales records. Property after property in Sunshine Meadows, all sold in the last 3 years, almost all of them listing the same property management firm. Morrison Investment Properties. Derek's company. Patricia's expression shifted from curious to very interested. They're using HOA harassment to force homeowners to sell, then purchasing the properties through Derek's company at reduced prices, then reselling at market value. That's creative. That's fraud. Real estate fraud, conspiracy, abuse of authority, and probably civil rights violations given the demographics of who they're targeting. I pulled up another file showing photos of the families who'd been forced out. Predominantly minorities. Young families. Anyone who didn't fit Linda's vision of what the community should look like. You've been busy, Patricia observed. I've been motivated. But here's where it gets federal. 2 of those shell companies have been making regular wire transfers to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. We're talking millions of dollars over the past 3 years. This isn't just small-time HOA corruption. This is an organized scheme using Derek's position as a police officer to intimidate residents, Linda's position as HOA president to manufacture legal-seeming violations, and a network of shell companies to launder the profits. Patricia was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then she smiled, a cold, predatory smile that I'd seen before when she was about to ruin someone's entire criminal enterprise. Marcus, how would you like to expand your current assignment? I was hoping you'd say that. Over the next hour, we laid out a plan. I would continue as Mark Coleman, the resident being harassed, but now with full FBI surveillance support. We'd tap Derek's financial accounts, monitor his communications, and build a comprehensive case against both him and Linda. Patricia would coordinate with the DOJ's Civil Rights Division because of the discriminatory nature of the harassment, and with the Financial Crimes section for the money laundering angle. This is going to take time, Patricia warned. Months, possibly. Can you handle continuing to live there while they escalate? I thought about Mrs. Johnson's exhausted face, about Mr. Patterson's stack of fines, about Mrs. Chen being slowly driven out of a home she'd lived in for 15 years. I can handle it. In fact, I'm counting on them escalating. The more desperate they get, the more mistakes they'll make. And if Derek comes after you directly, uses his badge to manufacture charges, then we'll have him on federal charges of civil rights violations and abuse of authority. Win-win. Patricia nodded slowly. All right. I'll get the warrant started for financial surveillance. We'll set up monitoring on all Morrison-related companies and accounts. But Marcus, her voice got serious, be careful. Cornered animals are dangerous, and a cornered cop with everything to lose? That's about as dangerous as it gets. I know. But I'm not exactly helpless. No, you're definitely not. That's what worries me. Don't be a hero. Don't engage. Just be a model resident, document everything, and let them hang themselves. I nodded, but we both knew that was easier said than done. Because Linda and Derek Morrison weren't the type to just back off. They'd proven that already. And now that I was actively investigating them, now that I was documenting their schemes, they were going to feel the pressure even if they didn't know where it was coming from. Sure enough, when I got home that evening, there was another notice on my door. But this one was different. Notice of HOA Board Hearing, Mark Coleman is hereby summoned to appear before the Sunshine Meadows HOA Board of Directors to answer charges of multiple violations, disturbing community peace, and failure to comply with community standards. Failure to appear will result in immediate fines and potential legal action to remove you from the property. The hearing was scheduled for 1 week from today. And I had absolutely no doubt that Linda Morrison was planning to make it a spectacle. Perfect. Because now I'd be recording every word. Part 7, the HOA Hearing Showdown and Final Revelation, 1,000 words. The community center meeting room was packed. Apparently, an HOA hearing where the president was going to publicly rake someone over the coals was prime entertainment in Sunshine Meadows. Every seat was filled, with more residents standing along the walls. I recognized most of them. Mr. Patterson gave me an encouraging nod. Mrs. Chen sat in the front row with her arms crossed, looking like she was ready for a fight. The Johnsons stood near the back, their baby mercifully asleep in a stroller. Linda Morrison sat at the head table on a raised platform like she was holding court, Derek beside her in full police uniform despite this being a civilian HOA matter. 3 other board members flanked them, all looking uncomfortable and avoiding eye contact with anyone. I walked in exactly on time, carrying a professional leather folder containing all my documentation. I dressed carefully for this, business casual, neat, respectable. Everything about my appearance said responsible homeowner and nothing said federal agent about to destroy your entire criminal organization. Tucked discreetly in my shirt pocket was a recording device so sophisticated that it could pick up a whisper from across the room. In the parking lot, 2 FBI surveillance vans were monitoring everything with directional microphones and cameras. Patricia Reeves herself was watching via live feed from the Phoenix field office. This wasn't just an HOA hearing anymore. This was evidence collection. Linda banged a gavel like she was a Supreme Court justice. This hearing will come to order. We are here to address multiple violations committed by Mark Coleman of 447, Saguaro Drive. She looked at me with undisguised contempt. Mr. Coleman, you stand accused of the following: improper lawn maintenance, unauthorized exterior decorations, parking violations, creating disturbances, refusing to comply with HOA authority, and general failure to uphold community standards. How do you respond? I stood up calmly. Mrs. Morrison, members of the board, thank you for this opportunity. I respond that every violation notice I've received has been selectively enforced, factually inaccurate, or outright fabricated as part of a targeted harassment campaign. The room erupted in whispers. Linda's face went red. That is a serious accusation, Mr. Coleman. Do you have any proof? I do, actually. I opened my folder and pulled out photos, comparing my property to neighboring properties showing identical or worse conditions that received no violations. I have comprehensive documentation showing that I've been cited for things that dozens of other residents do without consequence. I also have testimony from multiple neighbors who've been similarly targeted. Mrs. Chen stood up. He's telling the truth. I've lived here 15 years, never had a problem until I spoke up against unfair parking restrictions 2 years ago. Since then, I've been fined over $3,000 for violations that other residents don't get cited for. Mr. Patterson rose next. Same here. I've paid over $500 for window treatment violations, but half the street has the same curtains. One by one, other residents started standing up. The Johnsons. The Hendersons. The Ramirez family. A pattern emerged, clear and undeniable. They were all either minorities, young families, or people who'd challenged Linda's authority at some point. Linda banged her gavel frantically. Sit down. All of you. This is not your hearing. This is about Mr. Coleman's violations. No, I said quietly, and my voice carried across the room in the sudden silence. This is about systematic abuse of authority. This is about you using your position to target residents you don't like, to drive down property values, and to force people to sell their homes. Derek stood up, his hand moving toward his utility belt in what was clearly meant to be an intimidating gesture. You need to watch your accusations, Coleman. That sounds like slander to me. It's only slander if it's not true, Officer Morrison. And I have evidence that it's very true. Would you like to discuss Morrison Investment Properties? Or perhaps the 3 shell companies you're listed on that have purchased 6 properties in this community over the past 2 years, all from families that your wife systematically harassed into selling? The room went dead silent. Every eye turned to Derek and Linda. I watched the color drain from Derek's face and saw Linda's expression shift from rage to something else. Fear. Calculation. The realization that she'd badly miscalculated. That's completely false, Linda stammered. We have business interests, that's not illegal. And those property sales had nothing to do with HOA matters. Really? Because I have documented proof that says otherwise. Escalating fines, constant violation notices, threatening letters, even attempted vehicle tows, all targeting specific residents whose properties later ended up being sold to companies you and your husband control or have financial interests in. That's real estate fraud. That's conspiracy. And when you use Derek's position as a police officer to intimidate residents, that becomes a federal civil rights violation. Derek took a step toward me, and I saw genuine anger mixed with panic in his eyes. You don't know what you're talking about. You're making wild accusations without any real evidence. I smiled. Actually, Officer Morrison, I know exactly what I'm talking about. You see, I'm not just a homeowner. I'm Special Agent Marcus Thompson, Federal Bureau of Investigation. And for the past 3 weeks, I've been conducting a federal investigation into your real estate fraud scheme, your money laundering operation through offshore accounts, and your systematic civil rights violations. The reaction was everything I'd hoped for. Linda actually gasped. Derek's hand froze halfway to his weapon. The room exploded into chaos with residents shouting, some in shock, some in vindication, some probably just excited to witness the most dramatic HOA meeting in history. I pulled out my FBI credentials and held them up. For the past 3 weeks, every conversation, every threat, every violation notice has been documented. The FBI has secured warrants for all financial records related to Morrison Investment Properties and its associated shell companies. We have evidence of wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, abuse of authority, and civil rights violations affecting at least 43 families. Patricia Reeves chose that moment to enter the room with 4 other FBI agents. She flashed her credentials to the stunned crowd. Derek Morrison, Linda Morrison, you're both under arrest. Derek Morrison, you're being charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, abuse of authority under color of law, and civil rights violations. Linda Morrison, you're being charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and real estate fraud. Derek made a move toward his weapon, but 2 FBI agents were already on him, professionally and efficiently disarming him and putting him in handcuffs. Linda just sat there, stunned, as another agent read her rights and cuffed her. As they were being let out, Linda looked at me with pure hatred. You set us up. You planned this whole thing. I met her eyes calmly. No, Mrs. Morrison. You set yourselves up. I just moved into a house and wanted to use the pool. Everything that happened after that? That was all you. You targeted the wrong person, you abused your authority one too many times, and you forgot that everyone eventually faces consequences for their actions. You just didn't know yours were coming from someone who had the power to actually do something about it. As the FBI led them away, the community center erupted in applause. Mrs. Chin was crying. Mr. Patterson shook my hand vigorously. The Johnsons looked like a massive weight had been lifted from their shoulders. Patricia pulled me aside as the crowd celebrated. Well done, Marcus. We've got everything we need. The Financial Crimes Unit found over $4.2 million in offshore accounts tied to their shell companies. This case is going to put them away for a long time. What happens to the community now? The HOA will need to elect new leadership. The properties fraudulently acquired will be investigated. People who were scammed into selling below market value may have legal recourse. It'll take time, but it'll get sorted out. I nodded, looking around at the residents who were already talking excitedly, planning how to rebuild their community without the Morrisons' toxic influence. This was why I became a federal agent. Not for the dramatic arrests or the headlines, but for moments like this. For justice. For standing up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. 3 months later, Derek Morrison was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Linda got 12 years. Their shell companies were dissolved, their assets seized, and the families they'd defrauded were compensated through restitution orders. Sunshine Meadows elected a new HOA board, this one actually interested in serving the community rather than exploiting it. As for me, I finished my original assignment, wrapped up the financial crimes investigation that had brought me to Phoenix in the first place, and eventually moved on to my next posting. But I still keep in touch with some of the residents. Mrs. Chin sends me Christmas cards. Mr. Patterson emails me photos of his garden. The Johnsons sent me a photo of their son's first birthday party, held at the community pool, no harassment required. And every time I see someone abusing their authority, whether it's a cop with a badge or an HOA president with a clipboard, I remember Linda Morrison's face when she realized she'd targeted an undercover FBI agent. I remember Derek's panic when his entire criminal enterprise came crashing down. Because that's the thing about bullies, whether they're schoolyard tyrants or corrupt officials. They rely on people being too scared or too powerless to fight back. They bank on getting away with it because they always have before. But every once in a while, they pick the wrong target. Every once in a while, they go after someone who not only won't back down but has the skills, the resources, and the authority to bring their entire world crashing down around them. Linda Morrison wanted to take my pool keys. Instead, she handed me the keys to dismantling her entire criminal empire. Karma, it turns out, has a badge. And sometimes, karma is patient enough to build a federal case.